Joining me now is Dr. Annabella Bonata, Manager and Research Associate at the Center on Climate Adaptation at the University of Waterloo. Dr. Bonata, it's good to have you with us. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks for having me, Tony.
What do you make of the current wildfire situation across Canada? I mean, here in Toronto and Southern Ontario, as we both know, you don't have to do much more than go out your door today to experience the impact of it.
It wasn't a great long weekend for most of us in Ontario and Quebec and so many of the Atlantic provinces as well. We're seeing the effects of the wildfire season across Canada. So we're seeing something very similar to 2023, which was an unprecedented season. It burned the most amount of land we've had to this point. 2025 is following closely. So we're having wildfire smoke in many places across the nation and at a very high degree that's very dangerous. And parts of the country are burning that don't usually burn. So you just mentioned in Newfoundland, Labrador, those kind of evacuations, that's unheard of. So we're seeing wildfire in places that in the past would have not had it at this time of the year.
Dr. Bonata, what are some of the main factors that have made this season so severe? You know, I grew up in Southern Ontario, and I was saying a couple of hours ago to a different guest, I can't remember a summer where there's been so much haze and smoke obscuring our skylines of our major cities.
You know, I've had so many of those conversations this same weekend. What's changing is, of course, our climate. So we're producing so many emissions into the atmosphere that it's really causing this warming globally. And as the weather warms, as the climate warms, we're seeing much more drought in parts of the country. We're seeing hot, dry weather that helps spread that wildfire. So we had a really hot weekend, a very dry weekend in many parts of the country. No rain, when we usually would around this time. So climate change is really a driver for these kind of intense wildfire seasons that we're having. And so we should expect to see this in our future, what we saw in 2023 and now 2025. We should expect these to be our normal wildfire seasons going forward if we don't do anything to really slow down climate change.
Do you sense that we are on the verge of a major shift in how we adapt to this? And do you think that the political will is there for the shift that's needed?
Yes and no. I think it is there. I think after, we hear the evacuations, the destruction, the catastrophic losses from wildfire are just increasing. The price of wildfire is very high for us as a society and economically. We want to make changes. We just have, several priorities as a country. But I do think that, like you mentioned, speaking to someone, I've spoken to people this weekend. We're just not used to this. This is very new, but we're starting to see that every summer is becoming more complicated for us to live here in Canada, breathing this wildfire smoke, losing our homes, hearing about these losses. So it's really touching more and more people across Canada and waking us up to realize, hey, we got to do something, both on the reduce our emissions so we can slow down climate change, but also adapt our societies, our communities, so that we can learn to live with this new normal that we have. And we can do that through adaptation.
And I suppose, just if I could touch on one more point, Dr. Bonata, it's not really a one-size-fits-all solution. I had a deputy chief of a First Nation in northern Manitoba on the program last night who was telling me that they were trying to evacuate thousands of people out of their community, and because one of the only roads that they were able to use kept getting blocked by wildfire smoke, they were having problems with the evacuation itself. I could hear the desperation in his voice as he, on the ground in a real situation like that, called for urgent action and more resources on this.
Absolutely. It impacts all of us differently. So Indigenous communities actually see the most evacuations each year, but they make up the least amount of people in our country. So they're heavily impacted. Communities that only have one route to get in and out of, they're going to rely on helicopters, on the military to get them out. Where the rest of us, if we're impacted, we have a lot more options. So we definitely need to adapt differently to wildfire. There are some things that all of us can do, clearing out debris, moving away our wood pile, making sure we don't have flammable material close to our home. Any one of us can do that. But how we build our communities and how we design them. So for example, in the north, so people can evacuate when necessary and find a way out, that will become something much more important. So the infrastructure of those communities is something that needs to be adapted in order to see those changes.
A lot of conversations happening, I'm sure, and we appreciate this one. Dr. Annabella Bonata, the Manager and Research Associate at the Center of Climate Adaptation at the University of Waterloo. Thank you so much for your insight, Dr. Bonata.
Thank you so much for having me.